Hi there. I'm just trying to fix my little Christmas I made. Made it from scratch. I realized as I was checking out that I probably could have just bought a hat for cheaper. And then I got home and remembered that I actually own a Santa hat. Anyways, thank you for coming to my Christmas reading. I was trying to do a little something to maybe bring a little bit of enjoyment to people since 2020 has been such a garbage fire. Really unhappy year for a lot of people. So I had heard that the book The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry is about a really tough Christmas. I don't know. I've never read the book. All I know about O. Henry is that he had to turn this book in and wrote the whole thing in 2 hours because he cut it so close to the deadline. I also got a request that I make a Christmas cocktail beforehand. I myself, not one to judge, but I would never pollute my body with something as filthy and disgusting as alcohol. Whew. All right. So I got my cup of peppermint tea here. I got my yellow log fire going. And I think we are ready to dive into this. Before I do that, I just recently came across a Welsh Christmas tradition. I want to believe it's called like the Merry Word or Merry Word, something that looks like you can't pronounce it with too many Y's. But it's a tradition where they go house to house with a horse skull on a stick with a hood over it. And the people operating it go to houses and challenge the homeowners to rhyme-offs where they speak in rhyme, and then the homeowner has to respond in rhyme, and it goes back and forth until somebody has no more rhymes. And if the homeowner runs out of rhymes, then the people get to come inside and take whatever they want for their pantry. And I've heard that it's either originally a Christian tradition, originally a pagan tradition. All I know is that I would like to have more people wandering the streets with horse skulls on sticks covered in cloaks during this time. All right. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheek burned with a silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Dell counted, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop on down to the shabby little couch and haul. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up. Sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of honor is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly beggar description, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the medicinary squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also, appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity, when his possessor was paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were seriously contracting to the modest, unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached a flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Miss James Dillingham, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with a powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at the gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months. With this result, $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice to do to him. Something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequencing of longitude, obtaining a fairly accurate conception of looks. Della, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color with 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window someday to dry just to depreciate her Majesty's jewels and her gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck his beard with envy. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knees and made itself almost a garment for her. And she did it up again, nervously and quickly. She faltered for a moment and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the warm red carpet. On went her old brown jacket. On went her old brown hat. With whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered. Out the door, down the stairs to the street. When she stopped, the sign read, Sophini, hair goods of all kind. One flight up, Della ran, collected herself, painting Madame Large, too white, chilly, hardly looking the Sophia. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy your hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight look at it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped on by rosy wings. Forget the hash metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain and chastened design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by its meticulous ornamentation. As all good things should go, it was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Oh, I just forgot what story this is. I've seen it before. You know, like Futurama. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her, and she hurried home with 87 cents. With a chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling iron, lighted the gas, and went to work repairing the ravages made generously added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with the tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long and carefully and critically. "If Jim doesn't kill me," she said to herself, "before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat in the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. She heard his steps on the stair away down the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying little, silent prayers about the simplest, everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." The door opened, and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of the quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that had been prepared for her. He simply stared at her fixedly with a peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a wonderful nice gift I got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patient fact yet, even at the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well? Anyhow, I'm me, without my hair, ain't it?" Jim looked about the room curiously. You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air of almost idiocy. "You never looked for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered." She went on with all a sudden sweetness. "Nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed to quickly wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny the inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week, or $1 million a year. What's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but there was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Della," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut, or a shave, or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while there first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string in the paper. And then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then at last a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure turquoise shell, with jeweled rims, just a shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession, and now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned them, coveted adornments, were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little steamed cat and cried, Oh, Jim!" Had not yet been in his beautiful present, she held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull precious metal seemed to flash with the reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks with it on." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just as presents. I sold the watch to get the money to buy you the combs, and now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive, such as they are wisest, everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi. And that is The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. A Goldsboro native. He's buried in Nashville. I've been to that cemetery 3 times, but I've never visited him. Anyways, I believe I hear Antifa outside shouting for some figgy pudding. Hopefully I have some soup for them and their families. So they wrap things up. Let's all just hope that tonight 3 ghosts visit Jeff Bezos to give us all of his money. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. And so forth.